Hey, what's going on, guys? During the UFC 299 broadcast, the UFC finally announced the bout order for UFC 300, and it's an absolute disgrace. And I'm going to talk about how we fix it in this video, but I don't want to be one of these people complaining about UFC 300. It's the best card the UFC has ever assembled. Let's get that out of the way right away. This is an amazing card. The depth of fights of skill level we have on this card is absolutely unbelievable. Have I had my complaints along the way? Yes, of course I've had my complaints. The UFC booking Holly Holm, Kayla Harrison on this card was a little bit but it's on the prelims. The UFC booking Marina Rodriguez on this card against Jessica Andrade, I was like, but it's still a good fight. Didn't mind it. It's going to be probably on the early prelims. We finally found out the bout order. And there is one glaring issue with the UFC 300 bout order. And when I saw it, I reacted live on stream. I could not believe it. Could not believe it. And then Dana White was asked about it afterwards. And he kind of, wasn't really pressed on it at all. Didn't say, that's the bout order. That's it. We decided and that's what we're sticking with. And honestly, I know some people are going to comment down below and say, the bout order, who cares about the bout order as long as we're getting amazing fights? This bout order just blows my mind. I mean, it completely blows my mind. Let's take a look at the prelims right now. Let's look at the prelims. Because the prelims, you look at the prelims, you're like, oh shit, Joey, how are you complaining about this card? The top two fights on the prelims. Headlining the prelims, we have Jiri Prochazka versus Aleksander Rakic. That is the best headliner of the prelims that we have ever gotten, at least since I've been watching. And I'm assuming ever. I've been watching since 2010. I've been watching almost 15 years now. That's the best headliner I've ever seen on the prelims. Jiri Prochazka, Aleksander Rakic. Important light heavyweight fight, former champion, and one of the most exciting fighters on the roster, Jiri Prochazka. Second fight down on the prelims, Calvin Katter, Aljamain Sterling. Incredible matchup. Former champion Aljamain Sterling moving up to featherweight and getting a tough fight against Calvin Katter, who's in the top 10. And then we can go on, so on and so forth. The prelims are completely stacked. And also, we'll briefly discuss it here. They added the final fight to the card, which is Jalen Turner versus Renato Moicano. That's an amazing prelim. I mean, that is a crazy good prelim. And then the UFC's, of course, opening the card. Deiveson Figueiredo, Cody Garbrandt, Bobby Green, Jim Miller, Jessica Andrade, Marina Rodriguez, Jalen Turner, Renato Moicano, Sadiq Youssef, Diego Lopez, Holly Holm, Kayla Harrison. You get the point. We've gone through the fights. By the way, love Jalen Turner versus Renato Moicano. Also, the reason the UFC's opening up the card, there's some other minor complaints about the bout order I could make, but it's not really that big of a deal. But the reason the UFC is opening up the prelims with Deiveson Figueiredo versus Cody Garbrandt is so they can say, we're opening the card with two former champions. Because realistically, and this is not what I'm complaining about here at all, even though it is a minor complaint, the card should really open up with Andrade Rodriguez or Bobby Green, Jim Miller, or Holly Holm, Kayla Harrison. But I understand Holly Holm, Kayla Harrison is relevant to the bantamweight division, so I understand it's going to be on the prelims. But that's not my major complaint. Let's move on to looking at the main card of UFC 300. When they flashed it on the screen, I could not believe my eyes. Take a look at the main card of UFC 300. What is going on here? Bo Nickal versus Cody Brundage above Charles Oliveira versus Arman Tsarukyan on the main card. What kind of slap in the face is that? What an utter disgrace. I mean, it doesn't belong on the main card at all, but if they're going to put it on the main card, how are you going to put it over Charles Oliveira, Arman Tsarukyan? First off, Cody Brundage, as I like to call him, it's hard for me to even say Brundage, doesn't even belong in the UFC. Does not even belong in the UFC at all. He is the most bottom of the barrel fighter you can find on the UFC roster. Quite possibly the worst fighter on the UFC roster. I know he got a Batista bomb over, I forgot his first name, but Reese was his last name. He Batista bombed him. That guy, okay, maybe he's a little bit worse. But outside of that, I mean, this was one of the worst fights on the card. To be quite honest, this should have opened up the card. I would say Bo Nickal, Cody Brundage is the worst fight on UFC 300. Let me know down below. Comment down below. What do you think is the worst fight on this card? I would venture to say Bo Nickal versus Cody Brundage. And the reason I say that is it's just an easy win for Bo Nickal. It's a complete setup fight. It's another grocery store cashier for Bo Nickal to buzzsaw through. That's essentially what this is. And I'm okay with that. I understand the UFC's looking at Bo Nickal and they say, oh, well, he's only had 5 MMA fights and we're going to baby him because we see him as a potential star for the company. But meanwhile, you have Bo Nickal out there bragging about he would beat Khamzat Chimaev, he would beat this guy, he would beat that guy. And Bo Nickal has essentially become the UFC's version of the hold me back guy. The guy that acts tough, but he's like, hold me back. And then he can never possibly get into a fight because he's being held back. The UFC's quite literally babying him in front of our eyes, which, again, he's inexperienced. I don't have a massive issue with it. Would I prefer him to get a bigger step up because of how he's been talking and saying, I'm ready for this, I'm ready for that? I would ragdoll Khamzat Chimaev and this and that. And he never misses a moment to talk about his NCAA wrestling career. Sure, I would love to see him get a big step up. But the fact that he's inexperienced, I don't mind him fighting a complete bum like Cody Brundage, okay? But you're going to put this on the main card of the biggest fight card of all time, UFC 300? And you're not even going to put it the card opener. You're going to put it above Charles Oliveira versus Arman Tsarukyan. I hate this. And again, I understand some people are going to say, Joey, we're going to get to see all the fights anyway. What does it matter? It doesn't feel right. It ruins the momentum of the card. To steal a quote from Marlon Vera, you don't wipe your ass before you take a shit. It's just not what you do. And this ruins the card in a way. I don't remember I think it was UFC 281, I want to say it was. Or maybe it wasn't UFC 281. I think it was UFC 268. They had the weird card where they had Rose on the card, they had Gaethje on the card, and they had Usman on the card. And Trevor Whitman didn't want them all going back to back to back, so they opened up the card with Justin Gaethje, Michael Chandler. And it felt weird. It felt off. They had I think it was Shane Burgos versus Billy Q after that. I don't have it in front of me right now. But they had a fight after that. It was a really quality fight that got no attention because we just watched Justin Gaethje versus Michael Chandler. It's the quintessential, it's basically a post-slim. If you guys ever seen a card, they do post-slim sometimes. Well, they'll have a bunch of fights, they'll have the main event, and then afterwards they have the post-slim. It makes absolutely no sense to essentially, I don't know. I can't even think of any more analogies for it. It's just a disgrace. It does not belong on the pay-per-view main card. It doesn't belong above Charles Oliveira, Arman Tsarukyan. Honestly, if it would have been just opening up the main card, maybe I would have been a little bit less harsh on it. But how are you going to put Bo Nickal 5-0, beat up nothing but grocery store cashiers and Uber drivers, and now he's fighting Cody Brundage, who, basically got his, 2 fights ago, faked his way out of a fight via DQ. A fight he was getting dominated on. He's looked horrible. He doesn't belong in the UFC at all. Cody Brundage, I know he's tweeted out recently, I just work here. I feel bad for Cody Brundage because I know he's probably getting a lot of heat for this. How is he going to forever be enshrined on UFC 300? That is the type of name, that's the name value you want on UFC 300. And I get it. They're trying to build up Bo Nickal, but this is not the way to go about it. This is an atrocious bout order. And to be honest, this completely ruins the momentum of UFC 300. This is a stain on UFC 300. And I'm hoping, the UFC tends to rearrange cards. I don't know if they're going to rearrange this. They rearrange them all the time, but I just think they're going to be set on this bout order. I think they're looking at Bo Nickal as one of their future cash cows. They want to build him up. And I think, honestly, it would have been better off. We're going to go through a different bout order, a hypothetical bout order that I came up with here in a second. But I just don't think this is the move, putting him in a showcase fight on UFC 300 against a literal scrub, one of the worst fighters on your roster. That's what we're doing. It just makes no sense outside of, we just want him to be a future star, so we're just trying to build his name value. And I know Bo Nickal has gone out and said, I'm never fighting on the prelims. He should have been on the prelims of this card. Honestly, he should have opened up the fight card in its entirety, the very first early prelim, in my opinion, because this is quite literally the worst fight on the card. But how should they have built the card? This is how they should have built the card. And still, I don't completely agree with the bout order I'm about to show you. I know that sounds weird because I've come up with this bout order, but this would have been acceptable is what I'm saying. This would have been a fine bout order. It wouldn't have been as bad as Bo Nickal, Cody Brundage above Charles Oliveira, Arman Tsarukyan. Let's take a look at the new prelims. Essentially what you're looking at is Bo Nickal versus Cody Brundage as the main event of the prelims, okay? Because I know I highlighted, it's above Charles Oliveira, Arman Tsarukyan. How is Bo Nickal versus Cody Brundage above Jiri Prochazka versus Aleksander Rakic? How is it above Calvin Katter versus Aljamain Sterling? Those 2 fights were on the prelims, and I know the prelims look, oh my God, mind-blowing. The prelims are crazy. There's no reason that Bo Nickal, Cody Brundage should be above Jiri Prochazka, Aleksander Rakic. There's no reason it should be above Aljamain Sterling, Calvin Katter. But if we're going to do anything, I get it. You want to promote Bo Nickal. He's your kind of golden child. He's got the silver spoon, blah, blah, blah. Let him headline the main event of the prelims, essentially. The headlining act of the prelims. Because that's when the most eyeballs are going to be on the card anyway. Dana White's hyped up. Oh, it's a good spot to be on the main eventing the prelims because you have all these people who are watching who may not buy the pay-per-view card. So, and also the people who are going to buy the pay-per-view card, of course, are most likely watching at least these prelims. So you have the most amount of eyeballs on the headlining act for the prelims because even the people who maybe just want to watch the pay-per-view card because they're kind of casuals, they're going to tune in for the last fight because they're going to be, oh, the pay-per-view's starting soon. So in my rearranged bout order, you erase Jiri Prochazka versus Aleksander Rakic from the prelims, and you headline Bo Nickal versus Cody Brundage on the prelims. I understand it's still not ideal. It's over Calvin Katter, Aljamain Sterling. It's over some of these other better fights. You know, even Holly Holm, Kayla Harrison, in my opinion, is the better fight. Sadiq Youssef, Diego Lopez is every fight on the card is a better fight than that one. But it still gives them kind of that ideal showcase performance for Bo Nickal without staining the main card. And then here's the new main card for UFC 300. I rearranged it a little bit. Opening up the UFC 300 main card, you have Jiri Prochazka versus Aleksander Rakic. And then the fourth fight down would be Charles Oliveira versus Arman Tsarukyan. You kind of swap that up and then put Jiri Prochazka in the spot where you take Bo Nickal and Cody Brundage off. I just think this is a complete slap in the face. This is how the card should be ordered. There's no, and I know someone's going to say, Joey, why are you complaining about the bout order? This is crazy. This is like when they tried to sneak Miesha Tate versus Lauren Murphy on the main card of UFC 276. It's just an embarrassment. It's, you know, an insult on our intelligence. It's the UFC acting like WWE. All they're doing is trying to push Bo Nickal down our throats. And again, here's another scenario. If you really want Bo Nickal to be on the main card of UFC 300, he still has to open up the card, okay? He has to open up UFC 300. He's not being above Charles Oliveira versus Arman Tsarukyan. But why not book him in a meaningful fight in the middleweight division? So what you could have is you could book Bo Nickal versus Jack Hermansson opening up the UFC 300 pay-per-view main card. I know technically timeline is Jack Hermansson ready, but either way, the point is, if you're going to book Bo Nickal on UFC 300 main card, at least be it a decent test. We know he's going to run through Cody Brundage. So why not give him a decent test on the main card of 300? That's more acceptable. No matter who he fights, it's still not worthy of being above Jiri Prochazka versus Aleksander Rakic. I mean, unless you book Bo Nickal, Khamzat Chimaev, that would have been a crazy UFC 300 card opener, but Khamzat said he's not fighting on UFC 300. But either way, that would have been a way to keep Bo Nickal on the main card. Book him against a meaningful opponent, but instead we got to watch him take out a grocery store cashier, an Uber driver, and Cody Brundage, who doesn't belong in the UFC at all. We got to watch him take him out after we watch Oliveira versus Arman Tsarukyan. I mean, how does that even make any sense? That's like eating dessert before the main course. That's like, you know, I don't even know. I can't even think of enough analogies for it because it's just so weird and disturbing, and it's just a shit bout order. And that's why I had to make a video on it. So I really wish, and I want you guys all to complain. I want you guys to complain in the Instagram comments, respond to Dana White on Twitter, respond to the UFC on Twitter, tag them and everything. Bo Nickal versus Cody Brundage. I struggle so much saying Brundage instead of Bumdage. Take him off the main card. We don't want it on the main card. They're ruining UFC 300. And on top of that, I've already talked about this, and I'm not going to harp on the main event too much. They gave Jamal Hill a short notice turnaround. Not short notice turnaround, but a relatively short notice camp to fight Alex Pereira at 300. Jamal Hill coming off a devastating Achilles injury, taking a short notice. And it's just like bad decision after bad decision after bad decision. And it just makes the UFC seem like a fly-by-night company throwing these cards together last second. And this bout order, I don't know who approved this. I don't know how they got together in the war room or their Tuesday matchmaker meeting and they're like, let's finalize this bout order. Let's put Bo Nickal above Charles Oliveira versus Arman Tsarukyan. It's a disgrace to the sport. Make it headline the prelims. Realistically, it should open up the card, though. Bare minimum, it should be below Jiri Prochazka, Aleksander Rakic. It should be below Aljamain Sterling versus Calvin Katter. You could throw it on the prelims after that. Throw it above Kayla Harrison, Holly Holm, maybe. But I think ideal scenario where kind of both kind of methods of thinking work. Headline Bo Nickal versus Cody Brundage on the prelims. Move Jiri Prochazka, Aleksander Rakic to opening up the main card and bump Charles Oliveira versus Arman Tsarukyan up the card. This bout order is a slap in the face. I'm honestly praying one of them pulls out. I'm not wishing injuries upon anyone. I don't know what what the reason could be. It could be a cut in sparring or something. I'm about to call Cody Brundage up and offer him $12,000 to pull out. That's probably all he's getting paid anyway. So he can pull out, get another fight. It's not like he's going to win this one anyway. So he can pull out. He can get $12,000. He basically gets paid anyway. That's what I'm thinking about doing at this point. I'm about to call Cody Brundage, offer him $12K to pull out of the fight, and he makes more money without having to get destroyed by Bo Nickal on one of the biggest UFC cards of all time. I hope they don't put them on the poster. I doubt there's enough room, but imagine they're on the poster. You know, and I know the posters are already out, but I'm sure there's going to be other variants of the poster with more of the main card on it. Absolute disgrace. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and thank you so much for watching.